Good evening. Uh, Glad you guys made it back. And good week so far, right? It's only Tuesday. I think this is one of the slower moving weeks I've had in a while, which is nice. I like the pace of it. Now I'm lost for words. I slowed down for a minute, yeah. Getting rid of the overfunctioning, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, maybe kind of taking those, turning twos into ones from last night. Anyways, just want to say welcome. Glad that you are back. Glad that you joining us. If you're joining online, we're glad you're tuning in. And this evening, we're going to delve into our next topic. And I'm not going to waste too much time up here tonight. So let's just bow our heads for a word of prayer, and I will turn the time over to Craig. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your love and for your goodness, for all the beautiful things that you do for us. And Jesus, as we learned last night, that rest is something that you desire for us, that you have created this world and that you have created us with a desire for rest, and that in fact that we ought to work from it instead of for it. I just pray that as we continue to learn tonight, that you will continue to open our hearts and our minds, and may we just grow closer in our understanding of you, is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Just a quick reminder, if you didn't get a Connect card and you need prayer, or you would like to meet or something like that, if you didn't get a Connect card out there, there's one in the pew right in front of you, or in the back of the pew right in front of you, and you can fill that in, drop it in the little box out there. Like I've mentioned at the start of the week, if you wanted to meet with me or with Craig or with both of us, we can set some time aside for that. And then just a little preview for what's coming on Saturday. There will be a Q&A discussion, and we're excited about what that can look like. So if you have some questions as we go, write them down, make a note of them, because we can begin to maybe answer some of those questions on Saturday morning at 10. And then at 11 o'clock, we're going to have a special music feature before Craig speaks. So Linda, Bonnie, and Joe, if you're familiar with their music, they're going to be sharing some songs with us on Saturday at 11, so that would be good.
Cool.
Thanks, Craig. I'll
All
turn
right.
the time over to you.
Cool. Right on. Thank you. Right on. Yeah. It is really cool to be with you all this week. And my wife's birthday was on Sunday. Tax day was yesterday. My brother's birthday is today. So my daughter's birthday is at the end of April. So April is one of those months that we're poor. But anyway, it looks like do I need to move this up a little bit? Will that help? All right, we'll figure that out. Is that going to work? Is that better? Okay, I'll keep talking. I sometimes feel like I need to explain myself a little bit. Don't worry, it won't take too long. But there is kind of this somewhat unique thing of running that I trace back to the fourth grade. Fourth grade, I've essentially been running almost every day for a while now. But back to my fourth grade teacher, Iris Cathy was her name. She didn't seem to appreciate my humor. And so she would send me out to run laps around the ball field, so she could get her classroom back in order, and class clown wouldn't disrupt all the time. She'd send me out to run laps. My mom was also a teacher at that school, and she'd see me out there running laps. So I'd hear about it when I got home. But no, I would say that running has been not only a benefit physically, but emotionally. I process a lot of thoughts in the morning. I get up every morning and I hydrate with about 24 ounces of fluid just to wake my body up, have my devotional time, and then I go out for my run. It's just been that kind of a habit every single day for the last 5.5 years. And it's weird to think that I have run at least 1 mile, typically 4 or more, every day for the last 1,930 some days. And at the same time, that's simply 1 day at a time. It just happens to add up to that now. And if you all remember Forrest Gump, I celebrated my Gump Day about 2 years ago already, where he ran for the fictitious character, Forrest Gump, ran for three years and 2 months and 14 days or however many hours or whatever else. And so that's a very popular date that you celebrate when you're in this community of fellow daily runners, otherwise known as streakers. But don't go too far with that term, all right? A streak is simply a number of things in order. But it has been an interesting challenge to maintain a daily streak of running every day when you have a 6 a.m. flight or another early appointment, or you get to bed really late, or whatever it might be. You know, life throws all kinds of different challenges at us, and yet it's the regularity and the discipline of life that can help keep us grounded. It helps what keeps us normal. When everything else beyond our control, there are a few things within our control, you know, that can bring some normalcy to life. And for me, it just happens to have been running. And it's something that I actually enjoy, even though that sounds very strange. I'm familiar with Proverbs 28, where it says the wicked, what's the quote again? The wicked run when no one's chasing them? Yeah. Again, I prefer Romans 12, where it says God's put a race in front of each of us, and Jesus is the author and finisher of our faith. So anyway, another thing that I've learned from the discipline of doing certain things on a daily basis is it's not always convenient, it's not always pain-free, it's not always easy. Sometimes it's bone-chilling cold outside. I'll sometimes get back from a 4-miler in 20 below temperatures, and as I get back indoors, I think, you know, I might have just done the very hardest thing I'm going to do all day. So from here on out, it's a piece of cake. But it is kind of fun to see the online communities that I've become a part of on Facebook and to hear the stories of people who may not know the Lord, but they went through a crisis in their life and they turned to exercise as a coping mechanism. We talked about coping mechanisms last evening. And healthy coping mechanisms like exercise or diet or whatever it might be can be just a powerful tool to, again, bring your life back into balance. And people that have, I believe by God's grace, have broken through addictions, but now they're addicted to running. So, you know, there are things that are habits or routines, we might even call them addictions, but regular routines that keep us healthy. I would hope that sleep is a regular routine in all of our lives. I would hope that eating in a semi-balanced fashion on a regular basis is also a habit of each of ours. But I believe these can become more and more important the older you get. I have some young adult children that, at least our son, feels like he's pretty invincible at 23. And I kind of miss being 23. My joints miss being 23. But it again has been a joy to be able to just get out and run every day. And my very first marathon was in 2017 in Colorado. And running at altitude, I will take any day over running in humidity. But I met some people there at the starting line, and just talking and chatting. And if you're there at the starting line of a marathon, you have quite a bit in common with those other crazy people, okay? But you're in good company. And I remember talking with this lady, and she was so friendly, so nice, probably well into her 60s, maybe in her 70s. And I told her it was my first marathon. Oh, way to go, good job. This is going to be a great day. And I said, I sure hope so. She said, well, what's your goal and this and that? I said, well, what's your goal? And she says, well, I've run a marathon in every single state so far. And now I'm looping back again. So this is my third or fourth or whatever in Colorado. And people travel all over the world just to run marathons. But again, they're a little crazier than I am, perhaps. But anyway, but it's a fun community to be a part of. A pastor friend of mine in Colorado, Dave Kettleson, has run over 60 marathons. And he wouldn't admit to being the age on his driver's license, but I think running has kept him young. It's pretty incredible the things. His next goal is to do Pikes Peak Marathon, which is a half marathon up and the other half down. I'm not sure which is worse. So anyway, starting at about 8,000, going all the way to 14,000, back down again. But anyway, I'm not even sure that's on my list at all. Let me get this turned on here. And I want to share the root verse that I meant to share earlier this week. But Psalm 51 has always held a special place in my heart. And the words of David, I think, ring true today as well. And in this depiction of this verse, you'll see one word with a little asterisk beside it. That's the word that I changed from the word that you will know. And we'll read it with the word that we're familiar with. But create in me a clean heart, O God. That very first line is David, or just say it's you, calling upon the Creator to do something only the Creator can do in you. Isn't that beautiful? Create in me a clean or a pure heart, O God. What else? And renew a steadfast or a steady spirit within me. Anxiety would be an unsteady spirit. So restore to me a calm spirit. Renew that within me. And restore to me the joy of my salvation. I've changed that a little bit in sharing this with leaders and pastors, and restore the joy of my vocation. That word sounding somewhat similar to salvation, but the word vocation is the same root word in the Latin for voice, which we often associate with calling. And not just ministry or a few. I believe God calls all of us into the life that we lead as we follow Him, and He gives us gifts in order to accomplish great things for Him. So we all have a calling on our lives. And that last line, and uphold me by your generous spirit. I love the push and pull of the psalmist saying, God, I need you, and when you are with me, these are the things I'm able to do. And this idea of restore to me the joy of living, essentially, has become an important theme in the last several years. And so I hope that you kind of hear that common thread in all the presentations here this week. I've quoted a couple of times from Archibald Hart, a Christian physician who did a lot of writing, a lot of research on anxiety and adrenaline and stress and these related topics. And he asks the question on page 105 of one of his books, Adrenaline and Stress, so why do people stress us? Now, if you cannot relate to that first line, I might question that just a little bit, because I think at some point we've all felt anxious or stressed as we interact with someone. Maybe someone in our family. Again, now's a good time to not look to your left or right. It may be a coworker whose personality is so vastly different than yours or whatever it might be. But he asked this question, very thoughtful. Why do people stress us? Well, one reason is because we need each other so much. Again, we go back to the book of beginnings, Genesis, and we see Adam and we see Eve. We see the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We see the animals all in pairs. We see community is how God's creation was established. We need each other. We all have a need to be loved and accepted by others, and I'll even insert whether we'll admit it or not. We all have that need to be loved, to be accepted, and many of us will go to almost any length to achieve respect or avoid criticism. Now, there's a lot in that. I've come across some YouTube videos of a dog lover who will go into a kennel where dogs are held, strays and abandoned dogs, whatever, that have been abused. And you can see those emotions in the expression of the dog. I'm not just imagining that. I believe that's true. And as you watch this, and as you see him gently sit down beside, not right beside, but near enough to the dog. And the dog is just kind of cowering over in the corner and not even wanting to look at him. And he just begins talking. And he's talking to the camera as you're, watching this recorded video, whatever. But he's using a calm tone. And he just keeps talking. He just stays with. And he brings a few dog treats. And he just, over time, he just keeps talking. And the dog, begins to look over and to engage a little bit. And after 25 minutes, if you can hang in there and watch for 25 minutes, you actually see this dog just perk up and become alive when it realizes this human is not there to abuse them, but to love them. Amen. It's incredible. I mean, you can see it, and suddenly the dog's tail is wagging, and then ears perk up, and there's just a completely different, it's a dog, I know. Think about how incredibly more complex we are. And sometimes the burdens that we bear, whether real or imagined to some degree, the unhealed hurts that we cling to, the broken promises that have left us discouraged or unable to trust or whatever it might be, we will go to almost any length to achieve respect as a fellow human. In other words, please see me. That's all you're desiring. Just see me. Have the common courtesy or respect to recognize that I'm a fellow human. That doesn't happen when someone honks at you as they go flying by. That's not the kind of recognition we're looking for, right? To achieve respect and kind of a bit of the opposite, when you feel respected, it somehow gives you a sense of value. When you feel criticized, well, now we're going the other way, right? That can take us to a very negative place. And I think for most of us, we don't need much help. There's a voice in our head that will very naturally tell us how stupid we are. It's the voice of the enemy. And I'm not saying we all hear demonic voices, but I'm just talking about negative thoughts. And part of self-awareness and part of emotional intelligence that we're going to talk about is recognizing and knowing how to respond to that. Okay, next sentence. We fear rejection because we so desperately want to be thought of as having value. Our egos crave the respect of others. Well, you'd already finished reading that, but I think this just helps define what it is to be human and what it is to be human in community with others. And it begins in our families. How many firstborns do we have in the room? You're the oldest of all your siblings. Okay, several. How many of you are the baby? The last born, okay? I mentioned today's my brother's, he's my much older brother. He has gray hair, but at least he has hair. I'm the young one. But again, the longer we, get older, it's not young anymore. But, and any middle children in the room? Oh, yes, okay. A special group, right? One of my favorite shows when I was a kid was the Brady Bunch. And they don't make shows like this anymore. We know this. But this couple, each who has 3 kids, marries, and suddenly you have a yours, mine, and ours kind of, scenario. 3 boys, 3 girls, all that kind of thing. And the middle kids, I think it was Jan and Peter. Yeah, okay, there we go. Thank you. Yes, yes. They kind of had their own special storylines as the middle kid, because the oldest one, gets all the privileges first, kind of thing, because they're the oldest or whatever. But they also have the most responsibility at times. But the baby is the baby, and can get away with a lot of stuff. And we see this play out in the Bible. And again, I'm so thankful the Bible is filled with stories of dysfunctional families. All throughout Scripture. And again, from Genesis to Revelation, it's about God's love for us and that broken trust and then the fulfillment of salvation, His promise to us right there from the Garden of Eden, Genesis 3, all the way down, and for the final restoration when we're all going to be together again in the resurrection. Wonderful story. But everything in between is a constant soap opera of conflict and all manner of things. For God to have a conversation with Noah and say, you know what? I am sorry I even made humans. That's pretty serious. Have you read Genesis 6 lately? Wow. But again, He instructs Noah to build a boat. That was his calling. That was his purpose. And apparently, whether he was a carpenter or not, he became one and built that boat. But again, just thinking about relationships, it is an aspect of life that we all get to enjoy. And yet we're sometimes quite challenged by it. You'll recall the dashboard. And again, this is just an illustration that much of our individual work is to be aware. When my son was in basic training for the Air Force, he was taught quite a bit about situational awareness. To always be aware of the things around you. Not just your one little job right in front of you, but to be aware of the system or systems of things swirling about you. And the same is very much true of relationships. The best bosses are very highly emotionally intelligent. They may know a lot of skills. They may be able to take very complex things apart and put them all back together. I usually have parts left over. But good bosses are aware of their own emotions and aware of the emotions of others and can lead in those messy spaces of conflict and tension and engage in a healthy way. You'll remember the RPM and the speed, the amount of energy I'm burning versus the speed that I'm going. I found the Bismarck Trail here in town, and goes along the railroad track a little bit, and I felt like I was on a golf course at one point, and then at one point the trail just seemed to go straight up to heaven. I mean, it was like steep. I'm like, what? Okay, so I start going, but guess what happened? As I'm climbing, my heart rate is going up and up and up. And I'm moving more slowly than I was on the flat. There are times in life where we encounter a circumstance that requires way more of our energy, and we make way less progress than normal every day. And yet, just being aware of that and, okay, I got to back. I can't expect to keep the same speed going up that hill. It sure was fun coming down, though. So that was good. That was good. Because this car can coast, I'm telling you. I can coast. Maintenance required. That's the last dashboard light that I'll emphasize here. You are the first one to become aware, and then sometimes your spouse, when something's wrong. And I don't know about people that ask it every hour, honey, are you okay? Honey, are you okay? I'm fine, dear. But every once in a while, it's not a bad thing to ask if you sense something might be up. If the response is, no, I'm fine, then I would go with that until further otherwise notified. But there are often signs that we can pick up on that are on an emotional level, but sometimes they appear on a physical level, that we've been at it too hard for too long. And mine typically come in the form of stress headaches. I no longer get what I would consider migraines, but if you've had those, they are debilitating. You just have to go to bed, dark room, everything. I mean, tunnel vision, all the symptoms that go along with that. There's really not much you can do once it gets past a certain point. I have a good friend who just loves life and loves people and loves the Lord. And he is constantly working during the week and traveling on the weekend. And recently, he could hardly walk. He could hardly get out of bed. And this is someone that averages 20 to 25,000 steps a day. That's a lot, 10 to 12 miles. And so for him, it was just, I don't know what's going on. I'm having all this pain and all this kind of stuff. And what he discovered over a couple of weeks was that he had been too busy. He had taken on too much week after week and weekend after weekend. He just simply had not taken a day off for like 8 weeks. And his body was saying, stop it. His sciatic nerve, pressure, and the rest. I mean, many of you can relate. It shut him down. He had to teach his class over Zoom from his bed, but just for a week or so. Because again, as he rested and as he recovered, and it was a joy to see him last week and be able to try to keep up with him on a walk. But it's amazing how our body will signal to us that enough is enough. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. And intelligence is, we sometimes associate it with being smart, but it's also about being aware. I was going to say the government looks for things. That just wasn't going to end well with the word intelligence and whatever else. But we have the Central Intelligence Agency. Again, they're trying to be aware of everything happening within our nation and around the world and that kind of thing. So intelligence can sometimes just simply imply awareness. And of course, emotions is what it means to be human. So this is about the study of being aware of your humanity and everything that comes with it, good, bad, ugly, whatever. So emotional intelligence is your ability which can grow over time. This is not something that's just sort of fixed and whatever you got, you get, right? Emotional intelligence is your ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and in others, and your ability, if it just stopped right there, it would be just fine. That'd be easy. But it's also your ability to use that awareness to manage your behavior. You got to behave yourself to manage your behavior and your relationship. So understanding how we are wired helps us navigate life around us. Have you ever been in a room with a few other people and another person enters the room and the mood just seems to change without a word being uttered? Again, don't look at the person next to you, but I'm thinking about how contagious emotions are. If someone is really upset, really upset about something, it's kind of hard to hide it. But we get pretty good at it, but those that know us well and love us will often pick up on that. But even without saying a word, so my stepmom was a music teacher and then later a dormitory dean. So those were the two things she did in her 40 or so years of service. And as a music teacher, she directed elementary music from the piano. So she played the piano while facing the first and second grade choir, or the third and fourth grade choir, or the 5 through 8 choir, whatever it might be, a bunch of squirrely kids, okay? But she directed, so her hands were busy playing the notes on the piano. She directed right here. Oh yeah, and if you were in trouble, you'd get that look, you know? Or if she wanted you to sing cheerfully, you know, it was this. I mean, just from her expression, as I think about it, there was all manner of direction emoting from her face. And we kids knew, we picked up on it, because even as babies, we start learning about emotions by expressions on our moms' and dads' faces. That's how it begins. Everything you sense, from your touch to your taste and smell, everything you see, everything you hear, everything you feel in your central nervous system, all enters your brain through the brainstem. And as it does so, and again, I'm using very elementary terms because I'm not a brain scientist, but where in general do you do your thinking? What part of the brain do you do your rational thinking? The frontal lobe. There you go, frontal lobe, right. Where's the brainstem? Oh yeah, that's not kind of down south, way back here. So again, in a very simplified way, as those messages are being sent to the brain of something that you've sensed, maybe you've smelled the fresh spring, rain kind of smell, or a Krispy Kreme donut. That's much better, isn't it? And as that sense is traveling to your, I need to buy the donut, right? I need to make a decision, right? It passes through the amygdala. Before it gets to the decision center, it passes through your emotional center, and your emotional center is already trying to assign meaning to what you've just experienced. In this case, donuts are good. So there's even that thought that by the time it gets to the rational side of things, there's already a bias. Now, let's take something like someone is speaking in a very irritating tone, and that's traveling through your ears, doesn't have very far to go, but is traveling into your brain. It's again being assigned meaning before, it's creating an emotional response before you even have a chance to think about it. Now, there's not days in between this process. It's literally nanoseconds, okay? It's so, the brain, even Ben Carson wouldn't begin to claim that he understands the brain, right? It's just a fascinating organ of our being. But only God really knows that 3 or 4 pounds between our ears. But it's amazing that God wired us this way specifically so that we could be human, so that we could experience life emotionally, and that this process wouldn't get bypassed or left out of the equation, however inconvenient it is sometimes. So let's go back to the illustration, not the donuts. I'd rather go back there, but let's go back to the person speaking in an angry tone, and that entering our brain, and we're trying to process the words, we're trying to process the information, but mixed in that is the emotional connections to when we got yelled at as a child, perhaps. And we're attaching that meaning to it, and it's making us feel really small and really vulnerable and really defensive for that person to be speaking in an angry tone. You see where I'm going? It's not just the information, it's how it's being sent and it's how it's being received. So again, we're fearfully and wonderfully made, very complex, and yet these processes are so incredibly consistent and predictable. We know it's going to work like that. So to be prepared for those moments. And again, when we're talking about awareness, it only becomes important in the heat of the moment, not in the calmness of a sanctuary, right? Intellectually, oh, yeah, I get it. In the heat of the moment, to actually apply it, that's where the really hard work begins. Self-awareness is being aware of your emotions as they happen and the reactions you have with those emotions. Again, once our amygdala, about the size, there's two, about the size of an almond. Once we begin attaching meaning to those emotions, it creates a bias as we're trying to rationalize, as we're trying to think about what's going on. And so there's already a battle going on as we're trying to figure out what's going on. But the thing is, when we get anxious, the more anxious we get, the less our thinking process is able to really function at a high level. Our emotional process starts playing pickleball between our ears, literally right in the center of our brain, it back and forth with the emotional process, and our thinking process is going, oh man, it's just kind of shut down. And there are other processes that have kicked into action, fight or flight or freeze, those kinds of responses. So since our brains are wired to make us emotional creatures, your first reaction to any event is always going to be an emotional one. You have no control over this part of the process. You do control, however, the thoughts that follow an emotion. So none of us are off the hook. And you have a great deal of say in how you react to an emotion as long as you're aware of it. Walking in the dark has its, pitfalls. If you're not aware that there's a fallen tree across the path, but it is pitch dark, the tree is obviously there. But if you're not aware of it and you're walking along, you're going to go head over heels over that tree. If we're not aware, there's no way we can respond appropriately. And there won't be time if we're even lagging behind in our awareness. So this space in between the stimulus that's traveling at wicked speed to our brain, but then our choice in how we respond, that little space, that's where emotional intelligence lives. And so it kind of lives on the edge of a sword. That space is not that big when you think about how quickly our brain processes things. But between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Great words by Viktor Frankl. Really hard to live at times. Were it not for the grace of God and His forgiveness. Have you ever found yourself apologizing for something you said impulsively or reactively that once you kind of thought about things, you're like, oh man, why did I say that? But as long as you go back and apologize, make it right, life goes on, right? But again, this is that space that is so difficult to manage at times. So this is a summary of emotional intelligence. This is everything we know currently about emotional intelligence. This table. It's really that simple. And all we're looking at tonight is the very first quadrant of self-awareness. Self-awareness. Just right here. And that's the only person we're able to control. But we'll add the other dimensions to it. There's self-awareness and then self-management. What I choose to say or do with the knowledge that I have or the responses to what's happening around me. Then there's the recognizing emotions in others. That's the social awareness. Picking up on what others are experiencing around you, again, is what makes great leaders great. And it's not that you're going around and you're tending to everyone's feelings, but you kind of get an understanding or you kind of get the temperature of the room, if you will, when you're receptive to the moods and emotions of others. And it's also an invitation to engage with people or to give them a little slack, give them a little time. I think you all kind of know what I mean. So there's social awareness, and then there's relationship management, the choices that others are indeed able to make. So there's kind of these 4 different quadrants in which I have control over my quadrant, and I really do my best to have control over my choices and behaviors, but I'm completely out of control of that of others and what they're experiencing, as well as the choices that they make based on those emotions. So personal competence and social competence. Emotions. It could be said that emotions are essentially fear, love, and anger. That's about it. Fear, love, anger. And if that's your repertoire, if those are the only 3 crayons in the drawer, then okay, you can work with that. But emotional intelligence adds to our vocabulary. It adds to our understanding of the things that we experience, which might find its root in love or fear or anger, because those are very, very primary. Many psychologists agree on these 6 basic emotions: fear, anger, sadness, surprise, joy, and love. Children experience all of these every day. Again, they're just constantly experiencing all manner of different emotions. And then through adolescence, you're trying to figure out what you do with all these emotions. You're just like overwhelmed and, nothing makes sense and everybody's terrible and whatever else. But fear, anger, and sadness we might classify as negative emotions. Surprise, joy, and love we might positive. But really, most emotions are fairly neutral. They can take you one direction or another. They each can have some type of positive motivation as well as negative. But if you're old enough to look at that circle and say, hey, that kind of looks like a record. I love you. Colorful in the middle, and then it should have been black instead of that, whatever color it is. But so we begin with these initial 6. But what's interesting, each of these 6 have, well, more than 5 or 6, but this kind of illustrates or helps us understand that each of these emotions may be coming from a different place. Let's take anger for a moment. Perhaps you're just disgusted, or maybe you're envious, or maybe just irritable. Perhaps you're at wit's end and you're just exasperated, and that's the source of your anger. Or maybe you're enraged, which is a very intense form of anger. Well, how about surprise? Surprise, you might feel very moved, or you might feel overcome by a beautiful song or a piece of artwork or whatever it might be. You might be amazed that your teenage boy did his laundry. Wow, surprise. You might also be confused or stunned. and those are all different from one from another, and yet we might just use the word, oh, that really surprised me. Now again, this week is not about, well, tell me what you really mean. Well, tell me a little bit more. This kind of analyte, whatever that word is, trying to analyze everybody, right? But it is important, particularly when you're trying to understand what's going on in me, to establish the root of an emotion. What's also interesting is that this just keeps going and going, like the Energizer Bunny. It keeps going and going and going. Those that study human behavior at UC Berkeley, now again, it's UC Berkeley, but they claim that the human is able to experience 34,000 emotions. I don't know about that. That's a lot. But at least this colorful wheel adds, well, maybe this is the 64 color crayon box, with a sharpener on the back, It again helps us understand if we're experiencing sadness, someone may have disappointed us and we feel sad. Or perhaps we're feeling shameful over something we did. Or perhaps we're feeling sadness because we regret or we're feeling guilty. Or we're just feeling isolated or lonely. Again, traveling through to see where that emotion is coming from gives us a better understanding, like a diagnosis. When a doctor is asking you questions, they're trying to drill a little deeper from the symptom that's appearing to find out the cause. What's going on there? We'll talk about it a little bit tomorrow night as well. Several similar themes as we look at what it means to be an emotionally healthy disciple of Jesus. And we look at Pete Scazzero's work. But one of the important things about self-awareness and emotions is understanding the roots of emotions and asking yourself the why. Now this is difficult work, but to ask yourself, why am I feeling isolated or lonely? There's people all around me. Why is it that I'm feeling that way? What has caused or what has pointed me in that direction? I believe it's a useful exercise to create a genogram for yourself, which is essentially a family tree. Now, there are lots of different kinds of trees, but there are many trees that their root systems go almost as deeply into the ground as what you see above the ground in the tree, in the branches. As far as the branches extend, the roots also extend, not only to search for water to nourish the tree, but to support it when it's windy like it was today, right? Understanding your roots is important. But remember that it's a journey with God. None of us chose the family we joined. We were born into it. Hello, my name's Craig. I mean, it's a wonderful process that God gave us with family units, but we have to admit we're all just a little different. You get what I mean? Your family different than my family, particularly it's not just been in the last few generations, but most certainly with the complexity of families. This is why many people can relate to the depression that comes with the holidays. It's not just for loved ones that have been lost to death. It's also in gathering around people with whom they may have broken relationships that neither are brave enough to repair. These family dynamics that can live for a lifetime, unsolved, unforgiven, whatever it might be. Those levels of conflict that have an emotional tie to who we are, those hurt the worst. If you have a conflict with a coworker, that's on a different level, isn't it? When it's a brother or a sister or a parent or a child, that really gets in deep, doesn't it? And again, the Bible is full of stories to help us understand the love of our Heavenly Father, to know that He always loves us and will never forsake us. The story of the prodigal is such a beautiful one. And again, there were some serious family dynamics going on there, particularly when the younger one created the conflict by cashing in on his inheritance, basically saying, "Dad, I wish you were dead. Give me my money." And the older brother, the responsible one, "What? What an embarrassment, a disgrace, oh my." But then when the son comes back, the father is joyful and the son is ticked, the older son. All kind of different dynamics at work there. So to be self-aware is to first be aware of what triggers you. I'm not a hunter. I do not own a gun. But I do know a little bit about when you pull a trigger, something happens. And the same is true inside each of us. Now, if you're holding a particular instrument with a trigger that's loaded, you're very likely aiming it at something very particular when you pull that trigger. Not always true in life. You can be in the most inconvenient situation and suddenly feel triggered and emotionally reactive to something like, you're really upset. And this is not a good time to be upset. So to be triggered is your thing, not theirs. I want to share with you a trigger that I've recognized just in the last several years. For many decades, I did not understand why the smell of cigarette smoke caused me to be angry. That's an overreaction. To be a little irritated or, that's really unpleasant, is maybe understandable. But to literally feel anger, again, going back to that wheel, where's that coming from? I finally connected the dots in the last decade or so of my life. That when I was little, my biological mother decided that she wanted to rebel in her 30s as opposed to as an adolescent, and she left our family. Before she left, she began a very different lifestyle to my dad's and my brothers and I by smoking and drinking and just making choices that were very foreign to her family upbringing, to our family. It was just so different, so weird. But that, not just that lifestyle, but a whole new life and a whole other person, and she was gone. And the smell of cigarette smoke, again, your sense of smell is the most closely tied sense to your memory. That would make me think of when I was a little boy and when my mom left us, which would make me angry. It produces a lot of different responses, but it finally clicked. And while that life event many, many years ago is sad, yes, okay, you adjust, you move on. The smell of cigarette smoke causing me to be angry has nothing to do, zero, with the person holding the cigarette. Now, is it good for them? That's a whole different issue, okay? But for me, it would be completely unreasonable for me to take out my anger, which I'm feeling, on that person who's maybe driving by in their pickup truck with a cigarette. Makes no sense if I were to get mad at them because it's triggered something in me. So self-awareness helps me realize that's my issue, not theirs. If someone else triggers a difficult emotion in you, what they might have done might be a little irritating. The person right next to you may not have noticed. So again, being self-aware of your triggers is very, very important. We all have defense mechanisms. It's not just a race when I think about the tortoise and the hare, and I can relate a little more to the tortoise, but we all have defense mechanisms. For the tortoise, they pull in their legs and head and just wait. And just wait it out. Wait till the danger goes, wait till the storm passes by. The rabbit, I saw several rabbits along the trail today and didn't chase any of them, but boy, they can be fast. They can be fast and change direction like crazy. But if a coyote was chasing me and I was a rabbit, I'd want that skill to be pretty refined. We all have defense mechanisms to self-protect, and these are very predictable. We tend to have a go-to defense mechanism. I'll use the example of sarcasm. Sarcasm is humor with an edge. It can hurt. But it's a way that some people deal with criticism, and they fire back something that might seem kind of funny, ha ha, but no, it's not. There's a knife edge in there that they're fighting back with without appearing like they're fighting back. It can come in any different form, but all of us have various defense mechanisms that just pop out when situations arise to protect our ego and our pride. Being aware how I react under anxiety and or stress. Do I get bigger or smaller? This is similar to the tortoise and the hare. Do I get bigger and bossy, or do I get smaller and just try to wait out the crisis until everybody is done talking and arguing and I can just keep eating my mashed potatoes in silence over at the corner of the table, you know? There often is a correlation to the overfunctioners and the underfunctioners in that same relationship. Those kind of go together. We'll put that together on Thursday night. But to be aware of how I react under anxiety is really important. There are people that are meant, I used the illustration earlier this week, that are meant to be firefighters. They can run toward the flames, and we need those people. There are others that put on scrubs and they can go in during a code and they know exactly what to calmly do to keep that person alive. Amazing. There are others under those very highly anxious circumstances that don't want to go anywhere near those activities. So again, being aware how we respond to anxiety and distress, it might just show up in your chosen occupation that you find yourself in. Choosing healthy boundaries and life-giving habits. We're going to put some of these pieces together on Friday, which I hope will be a very useful activity for you. But we've talked a little bit about boundaries. One of them is the boundary of rest, which we talked about last evening. The wonderful invitation by our Creator to take a Sabbath rest every week. To even pause at the end of the day in gratitude for the accomplishments and to just put to rest the activities of the day so that you can rest and recover and be ready for the next day. Healthy boundaries come in many different forms. And as I said before, it's not simply the ability to say no. A healthy boundary might be recognizing in your spouse or in a close friend that when you start talking about certain topics, they get very, very upset. And when they get upset, they begin yelling at you. A healthy boundary could be, you know, perhaps we should talk about this later. I'm going to go to Walmart and get a few things, and I'll see you a little bit later. That is a boundary where you're literally stepping back from the action, giving them some space, but giving yourself some space because you know the abuse that you've taken in those situations in the past. But you have choices. They're not always pleasing to the other party, but that's what makes them boundaries. And none of it is formulaic. You do it, it works, it's great. No, sometimes there's a big backlash for setting a boundary. But recognizing the importance and actually executing those in your life is important. And then again, Friday night, we'll also talk about living out your values. What is of vital importance to you? Not what you've been told should be important, not even a carbon copy of what was important to your parents, but what is important to you. We'll journey through that a little bit on Friday evening, but that's also a part of awareness. But at the end of the day, recognizing that you are indeed human and no, you're not yet perfect, and extending yourself a little bit of grace as well as others. There's a lot on that slide, isn't there? It is a great relief when you take inventory of a complex situation and you recognize what is within your control and what is out of your control. I believe that AA and NA have done a tremendous ministry to people by helping them recognize the things that are within their control, the things that are not, and asking God for wisdom to tell the difference between the two. Because it's not very easy. There's many things that we think we can control that we can't. But this is an illustration of some of the things that we are in control of, our boundaries, our thoughts and actions, the goals that we set, how we use our energies, how you speak to yourself, how you handle challenges. Those are within your control. What's out of your control, not out of control, what's out of your control. The past, the future, the actions of others, what happens to you. Of course, your choices of how you respond to what happens to you is within your control. What other people think of you. I saw two graphs, kind of that old school circular graph. One was really tall and one was really, really short. And one was labeled, how much time you spend worrying about what other people think. And the little bitty short one was how often other people actually think about you. Okay, I get the point. Totally get it. But when I was in grade school, I just thought that I was constantly worried about what other people thought about me and all that. Kind of to summarize a little bit, because I think we're getting toward the end here, but self-awareness, anxiety is a natural reaction, but it's not meant to be a chronic condition. Just like guilt in the Bible is not meant to be a permanent state of mind, guilt. It's meant to be a catalyst to lead you to repentance and therefore be forgiven. What did the guilt do? It got the ball rolling. Is it meant to roll right alongside you the rest of your life? No. The same is true of anxiety. God designed me to experience life emotionally and to react responsibly. I can only choose how to respond to that which I am aware. And self-awareness grows with my curiosity. It grows with my healthy identity, and it also grows with my emotional vocabulary, really being able to name what I'm experiencing. What's causing me to be angry? Drilling down a little bit to understand where that's coming from. And then self-awareness is my personal work, a journey of maturity, a lifetime journey. I like this quote, again, from Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I'm currently reading the latest book on emotional intelligence called Optimal. And it uses a lot of very current research in the business world, which is really cool. Fortune 500 companies and leaders and all this kind of stuff. And really, really fascinating to see these similar principles being lived out in very contemporary ways. But getting to know yourself inside and out is a continuous journey of peeling back the layers of an onion and becoming more and more comfortable with what's in the middle. I think an onion is a very purposeful illustration because in peeling one back, it might just make you cry. And it kind of stinks a little bit. But to be comfortable with what's in the, not to accept as, well, I guess that's always going to be the way it's going to be, kind of comfortable. But this kind of comfortable is not a denial of what's actually there. If we truly believe in the gospel, we know we can find healing for whatever we find in the middle. For whatever we find in the middle. That's what makes emotional intelligence and the discipleship journey such a wonderful parallel, is that we can find healing, we can find hope, we can find wholeness in Christ. The true essence of you is that stinky center of the onion. Your hardwired emotional reactions to anything come before you even have a chance to respond. Since it's impossible to leave your emotions out of the equation, managing yourself and managing your relationships means you first need to be aware of the full range of your feelings, both positive and negative. Kind of a summary statement, really, of emotional intelligence, of self-awareness. This is the second quadrant that we're not going to get into. This is just one slide about self-management. But self-management builds upon the foundational skill of self-awareness. Ample self-awareness is necessary for effective self-management, Because again, you can only choose how to respond to an emotion actively when you're aware of it. And again, it can be a very awkward and messy journey. But without self-management, without making positive choices with your self-awareness, it's really not worth much to just be aware but then ignore and not do anything with it constructively. But this is, again, a different kind of summary. What's interesting about families and about leadership is we want to jump to the far right column. We want to build trust. We want to manage expectations. We want to empower others, and we want to be able to manage conflict. Doesn't that all sound very noble? Sure. We can't get there without the other three building blocks. We just can't get there. Again, we've talked a lot about self-awareness, self-management, resetting your mindset, managing your emotional triggers, communicating directly, maintaining your passion, and then social awareness, listening attentively. Good listeners are hard to find anymore. And good listeners don't check their phone while you're talking to them. There are so many more distractions than ever have been just in the simple communication, one human to another. Tuning into the emotions of others. There's empathy, there's sympathy. We sometimes get those two turned around. But relating to and validating what a person is feeling. Maybe even saying, well, if I were in your shoes, I would be upset too. What do you think you should do? You're acknowledging the emotion, but then you're also maybe trying to help turn them toward a solution, but you're not trying to fix it, right? Knowing your team, again, in leadership, so important, and then learning the landscape or the system. Those are the various elements that build up to relationship management. All right, last slide. So on your personal dashboard, I need to pay particular attention to, and then you can answer that for yourself. When I think about my own wellness, I know that there's been kind of a sign or a feeling or a notion that I need to pay attention to this. What is this for you on your dashboard? It could be as simple as getting that 8 hours of sleep versus 4 or 5 or 3. It may be, I know for me, it has been in recent years adding salad as a regular staple every day, at least one. And again, that's made a huge difference in my life. In what situations might it be difficult to remain self-aware? An example might be when you feel very highly vulnerable and you feel like you're being attacked by the discussion, which seems to be coming in the form of criticism, and you're taking it really personally. That might be a time where it's difficult to remain self-aware because you're triggered and you're responding emotionally to what's going on. Another situation in which it might be difficult to remain self-aware is in your family. Our family members know us well enough. They know how to hurt us more effectively than others. To be self-aware of the weight of our words to each other. Anyway, there's all manner of ways we can be self-aware, and just thinking about an area you might want to focus on. And then lastly, what are some things that I can do to increase my self-awareness? We've talked about a few of them tonight. But emotional intelligence, was sometimes called EQ or EI, is different than IQ, which came around several decades ago, which was kind of a measurement of someone's intellectual capacity which was somewhat fixed for that person's lifetime. You're kind of born with a certain narrow range of IQ, whereas emotional intelligence is something that can grow the more we work on it and expose ourselves to understanding and self-awareness and that kind of thing. And certainly, I think the Bible supports us loving one another. Right there is a tremendous call to maturity. Emotional maturity. To be able to love your enemy, Jesus said. If they slap you on one cheek, let them slap the other. Whoa! How hard is that? And yet it requires incredible emotional maturity to stand there, to interact, to not run away, to not punch back, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. So again, I believe the Bible, in its principles, calls us to this level of emotional maturity. Well, let's pray. Wonderful God, we again thank you that we are wired by you, our Creator, to be emotional creatures, to experience life richly. And yet it also is a double-edged sword. We can experience joy and happiness. We can also experience anger or sadness or many other emotions. Lord, help us to become more aware and help us to be good stewards of our emotions so that we can make good choices and interact with those around us with empathy, with love, with compassion. This is our prayer, knowing that it's only possible by your grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much, Craig. I hope you have been enriched this evening and learning a little bit more about emotional intelligence. I know saw a couple of heads going when you had the slide up of the various different parts of the brain and like how we self-regulate and what we're in control of and what we're not in control of. And that's helpful to understand that we can be in control of things even when it feels sort of out of control, right? One of the things that you get to be in control of is whether you get to win a prize. And you get to be in control of that by putting your name in this bowl. And I'm going to ask Craig again just to assist me here this evening. I'm going to give you the bowl. You just kind of mix it around, and then or you can pull one out, and then... Yeah, I should probably put mine in too. Lily Metz. All right. Tonight's giveaway is a gift card to Fireflower Pizza in town, which is a pretty great pizza place. One thing as you leave here tonight, tomorrow we're going to be delving more into what it means to be an emotionally healthy disciple of Jesus. And there is an assessment that Craig would like you to take. And so Kisa's standing at the back of the door, and she has assessments that you can take home. And it takes a couple of minutes to do, so just take your time with it. And if you're watching online and you're thinking, oh man, how can I access this? In the live chat, you can access a link, and you can either do the online version of the test, or you can download the printable version, which is what we're handing out here. So take that assessment, bring it back tomorrow night, and Craig will talk a little bit more about that. We wish you a very good night, and drive safe. Thanks for coming.